How much sleep did we get last night?
Last night,
Yeah.
we got precisely 5 hours interrupted by 2 units of 20 minutes of chaos
Yes.
each.
We did not sleep very well
No.
because the power was going on and off, and it was a storm, and
Kids came in the room.
yeah, it was
And,
just not a night full of good rest. And just like that
watch
night,
the segue. Here we go. Watch the segue. Here we go. What is it?
stop. Just like the terrible night of sleep that we had,
Okay, I'm with you. Yeah, keep going.
Job has had a terrible time with his friends.
Oh, and there it was. There it was. Hey, it ain't pretty, but it gets the job done. It's like a Ford truck. It's like nobody's looking at it going like,
You better
that's
watch your words right now. You are being unkind.
no. Hey, baby, come here, girl.
No.
Okay. Hey, I like that. That was Segway Central.
We're talking about difficulty, and last night was difficult.
What is this podcast? I don't even know. I don't know.
But we're taking your questions today.
And
That's
we
what
are
we're doing.
answering them to the best of our ability.
And this episode
Is brought to you by our friends at BetterMan. We
That's
hope you
right.
check them out. You can go to their website, betterman.com. That's betterman.com. More about them in a little bit. Stick around for the episode. Come on, Segway Monster. Boom. Q&A. Hey, I've liked these.
the Q&As.
Yeah.
Me too.
I didn't know how I think. This is kind of like the, season 4, trying something new.
Yep. But I've always liked Q&As.
I mean, I'm pro Q&A. I'm pro, yes, I like both those letters. I like that we're giving episodes to them. Okay. Excuse me.
We hope you like them too, because
Yeah.
that's what we're doing.
Yeah. We got some questions in from, and I'll just say this again, we get questions from Instagram, so you can follow us there, and you're going to get updates on all these episodes, by the way. So go to Instagram, and it's at the Clearly Podcast. And then you can always email us any question you have at question@clearlypodcast.com. Mm-hmm. And so we got questions there, and then we got questions from our live audience. If you want to be a live audience member, if you're like, Jimmy, that sounds amazing. That sounds life-changing. How can I be a part of said crew? Go to patreon.com and sign up to be a Patreon partner with us. For as little as like $5 a month, you can jump on with us, and you're part of all the episodes. We send them to you. I give you a shoulder rub every Thursday. It's like a whole thing. That's actually not true, but it's every Wednesday. That's Thursday is when I play bingo.
Wow. You're just
okay.
making stuff up now.
That hurt. Okay, here we go. So question 1, we got this in from Instagram. And a woman wrote in and she said, the biggest suffering experience I've had is a miscarriage. And she's asking if she should understand that is some expression of judgment. We've obviously been in the miscarriage world a number of times.
Yep.
And we've talked about it on the show a lot.
Mm-hmm.
What could we say to her? Comfort we could share? Yeah.
Well,
Is that a thing you ever felt, by the way? I mean, like, it's one thing to be grieved in the middle of it. Was that like a temptation for you to understand it that way? I know that.
Well, we did just, if you're listening to this episode and you haven't listened to the one before this, you should go listen to the one before this, because we did kind of get into this.
Some folks have framed it for you that way.
Yes.
Yeah.
I think that it's tempting to look at it that way because it provides, in some ways, a easy fix, and that's what everybody wants. How can this stop happening? And if it's judgment for sin, then that gives me something to do. That gives me, there's a motherly instinct that happens even in miscarriage, right? It's like, something's killing my children. What can I do to stop it? I will do anything to stop it. And so it's a terrible thing for that to be assumed or thought about, because like we just said in the last episode, suffering is not only judgment. It is sometimes that, But suffering also happens to righteous people. Bad things happen to people who are walking with God, and there's mystery in that. Why is it happening? We're not always told exactly why. I know plenty of people who've just have no even physical explanation for why they've had recurring pregnancy losses, and it's just terrible because you just never know. But it is tempting to believe that it might be some type of judgment for sin because it gives you something to do. But it's also really painful. So if you've had that, I think that I don't think we should ever assume that about anybody or about ourselves. I just don't see a strong enough connection in the scriptures, especially for believers, for that to be an assumption made, for that to be something we should ever assume, say out loud, or question in somebody.
Yeah.
I just don't. So I would say only God knows why it's actually happening, but my working assumption for myself and for others is not that it's judgment. It's that
That's right.
Righteous people suffer, and life and death is in the hands of God. And why? I don't know the specifics of why.
I think that's good. There's just no model in the scripture too of like, let's all speculate on this event and
right.
why it happened. That's not, and the times when it is, when that does show up in scripture is like in Job, when God rebukes the friends, you know? So I do think you're right to just highlight there is mystery.
Right.
Until we are with the Lord, the curtain is not always pulled back. We don't know what's behind it. We don't know what he's always up to in a sovereign will.
There's mystery, and it feels a little chaotic this side of eternity. It does, because it feels, why this person? Why me? Why not them? Why did this person die? Why did this? It all feels very, it doesn't, we don't see patterns. It's not like we can see this like chain reaction of like, oh, these things tend to happen to these types of people. It just feels random sometimes to us. And if you read the book of Ecclesiastes, the author of Ecclesiastes will speak to this. And he'll talk about, I have looked over the earth and all the things that have happened. And he'll speak to that sense of like chaotic feeling that bad things just happen to people for no seeming reason to us on this side of eternity. My favorite analogy for understanding this or making sense of it was something Corrie ten Boom used to say. If you know who that is, she would say she would bring a needlepoint with her to speaking events at times and show people the back of the needlepoint. I don't know if you've ever done that.
You should probably describe what a needlepoint is.
Needlepoint or cross stitch.
For everyone under 150.
So these are things I used to buy at Hobby Lobby, and you follow a little, design, and you follow the pattern, and you're using different color thread, and you're making something. You're making a picture, and you're putting the thread in to make the pattern of the flowers or whatever the picture is. But the back side of it, you have no concern for it. Like the backside doesn't matter because you're using it to get the design on the front. So if you were to turn it over and look on the back, it just looks crazy. There's string everywhere. There's different colors. There's no real order you can see to it. So Corrie ten Boom would bring this to speaking events to deal with that question of, why is this happening? Why do the righteous suffer? Is it, we can't make sense of it. She's like, yeah, it's because we're looking at it from this side of heaven, and we see chaos. We see string everywhere and colors of different kinds, and it doesn't make sense to me. But every one of those colors, those threads going into every place is intentional, purposeful, and creating something beautiful. And on the other side with God's vision, we will see,
that's good.
I was on this side of it, but I see your vision now on this side, and it is all orderly and perfect. So like God claims control, he is in control, and that he is good. But on this side, it does feel a little chaotic at times. And I think it's okay for us to admit that. To come back to the original question, the biggest suffering you've ever experienced, whether that's miscarriage or something else, I do not think it's right to just blanket it with, it's judgment. Yeah. It's more complex than that. And God is up to more things than we could fathom. And it's a great loss, not right to assume.
Yeah, and if I could add one other thing to it, if we're talking about this, and I'm talking to a Christian, I want to double emphasize that we said this last episode, but for the Christian, the scripture is repeatedly clear that Jesus Christ has removed the wrath of God from you. So even if there's a thing that happens to us as a Christian that we knew, guaranteed, was God's response to our sin or something like that, even if we somehow knew that, like a piece of paper floated down from heaven and we were like, oh, here it is. It's gold leaf, so we know it's from God. Even if that were true, we could be certain that it was not an expression of his wrath, but of his fatherly love and correction. But that's just something that needs to hum in the background for every Christian. But again, I think the ultimate thing when it comes to something as complex as a miscarriage is just we have to say no comment and go, God knows. And we'll see the other side of the, what is it called again?
Cross
stitch
stitch
fix?
Needlepoint.
CrossFit? Yeah. We'll see the other side of the CrossFit.
Wow.
in
Just
heaven.
Google it, guys.
That's right.
Just Google Corey Ten Boom, or Needlepoint, or you can see pictures of her doing this. If
Are you
Google it.
150 years old? You said you
I
went
sound
to,
like it right now.
to Hobby Lobby and did this as a
I
girl.
did this as
was
a
this,
kid.
Did that, in the 1850s,
Okay.
was there a Hobby Lobby
Let's
or was
move
that?
on
Okay.
to the next question. Okay,
This is
we have a
gonna
lot
go
of
great.
questions.
This is
Let's
going to
go.
go great for me after this, guys. Okay. Let's do this guy.
Okay.
Does Philippians 1:29 mean we should be happy to suffer for Christ? Let me read Philippians 1:29 so you can know what we're talking about. We got that one in from Instagram as well. Here's what it says. Paul is writing to the church in Philippi, and he says, "For to you it has been granted for Christ's sake, not only to believe in him, but also to suffer for his sake." So, that verse it's the verse that I'm going to most commonly go to communicate that God grants not only our faith, but our experiences of suffering, that God, in a sovereign way that doesn't make him guilty for sin, is behind the hard things in our life.
Yeah.
And I think this writer, or this question asker is saying, hey, since it is from God, and since in this context it's definitely, with a view to like suffering as a Christian, like persecution.
Should we be happy about it?
Yeah. Should we not feel like the grief of it? Should it not produce a longing for it to go away? Those types of things. That's actually a really good question. Thanks for tuning into Clearly, guys. Next week, we're going to be covering panda bears. Okay, so here's what I would say to that question. I think that suffering in itself is never a good. It won't be happening in heaven. Right? We know that God's going to wipe away every tear from our eyes. We know that there will be no grief of that kind of quality in heaven. So if it's not there, that means that in itself it's not a good.
Right.
And if it's not a good, I don't have to love it.
Right.
But as we're going to talk about next episode, there are things working behind the suffering in God's mind as he's sending it our way, that in God's mind is a good. God can do a thing in my life that is not a good in itself, but is working good for me behind it, that he does invite me to delight in that thing behind it. Again, we'll get into it, but suppose for a moment that suffering comes your way to produce in you a deeper dependence on the Lord. Is the suffering good? No. Is me, at the end of it, treasuring Christ more a good? It's the highest good. So there is a way to undergo it that I think we can say, I am sorrowful, like Paul says, but I'm always rejoicing.
Right.
We're going to hold both things in tension. The immediate thing that I'm experiencing, I hate this thing. The thing that is being produced on the other side of it, I actually love that thing. So I will endure this thing for that thing. Just like we read in Hebrews, Jesus endured the cross, despising the shame, because he was looking for the joy on the other side of the
Yes.
cross to come. And in many ways, that is how the Christian ought to think about suffering. Hating the thing in itself, loving the thing it's producing. And we'll talk about
So
that
happy
more
to
next time.
embrace it,
Yeah.
though not for its own sake.
Yeah.
I
It's not a
mean-
good in itself.
I think about our two of our kiddos have cochlear implants, and it's a scary. Even though it's a helpful surgery, who likes sending their kid back to surgery? You know, who's like going, "Yay, anesthesia for my child and incisions," you know? But in that moment, it was, and the kids were nervous about it, but it was for their good. It was accomplishing something really good. But it's not like we're going, "I can't. The hospital's awesome. I can't wait to be there." No, but I am excited. We went into that with joy because it was producing something good, but it's not the thing itself.
Right.
We're not, yeah. So I think that's a great
Yeah.
one. Okay.
You got one?
Another question. Someone in our live audience brought this up. What about, we just talked about the friends, Job's friends, and all their conversation with him. But what about those 7 days that they were silent? Wasn't that a good thing? And should that then be the practice for all of us in regards to how we comfort others in their suffering? So if you remember in the book of Job, the friends come and they don't say anything for a week. It's a long time to be quiet. Most of us can't be quiet for 2 hours.
Oh, burn.
Let alone for a
Have
week.
you met my kids? Yeah.
That's a long time.
Yeah.
And they're silent due to the depth of suffering. And I would say from personal experience myself and walking with others, I think though the book of Job doesn't look at us and say, therefore, you should do this. But I do think it is modeling for us how comfort should be expressed, that what silence is I'm present. I'm giving you my presence, not my words. I'm giving you me here with you, not my correction, my encouragement, my truth. I'm not giving you those things. We mentioned this in the last episode that our youngest had just a early sickness in his infancy. And I remember in the aftermath of that just feeling such a profound longing for presence. It's the only time in my adult life I've called my mom and said, "Mom, I need you to be here. I'm not okay." And because I've never said that before, she was like, "I'll be there tomorrow." And just I just felt like I just need someone with me. I don't need her to say anything. I just need to know there is another person in the house and their only job is to just be with me. Presence is really powerful. It's a very precious gift we can give to people. And I think it is one of the most important gifts we can give to someone who is suffering. And I think we should linger in that as long as possible. I think that's at least now what I will tell myself when someone has experienced a loss of some kind. How can I be present with them and silent? Like, I'm going to resist the temptation to give words. Every one of us feels when someone suffers. It's just a human temptation to like ease the tension of the moment and like make it all right somehow. It's okay. People said this to me a lot in Miscarriage. It's okay. The next one will work out just great. It's like, what? What are you saying? I don't care about the next pregnancy or if that's even going to happen. I'm sad that this baby died, but no one means harm. It comes out of our mouths. We almost can't help it because we feel the tension of the loss and we want to use our words to fix it. And so when we think about people suffering, I think that should be our MO. That's what we should be doing. I'm going to be silent and present as long as possible. I'm going to stay in that with them. And that's such a gift to people. So I would say, I think that is a good practice for all of us. And I think healthy.
Hey guys, Jimmy here. This episode is brought to you by our friends at BetterMan. What is the most trusted voice in the life of a man today? It's BetterMan. BetterMan is more than a resource. It's really more of a movement. That everyone agrees that when men are better, the world is better. Yeah, BetterMan gives men the language and the license they need to be all that God has called them to be. When men are at their best, marriages thrive, children are blessed, the church is strengthened, the world changes. Yeah, let's change the world. Check them out today at betterman.com. That's betterman.com. Why do you think that even good biblical counsel for a sufferer. Let's say it's not Job's friend's counsel. Right. Let's say it's actually true stuff, like what we're going to talk about next week. I think we'd both agree, even that is like, hey man, slow your roll with like doing all that. But I'm just asking for me now what you would say about like, why is even that something that we should be, even the good truth? What? It seems to me on paper, my little logical brain's like, but it's true. And if it's true, you're going to, and I'm just curious. I would counsel someone, hey man, I get it. Romans 8:28 is true, but like, chill.
It's one of the most precious truths in all of the scriptures.
Yeah.
Yes.
And yet, you should probably keep that one in your pocket longer,
Chief. You should probably not say it yet.
And I'm asking why. Why? What would you say to that? I don't know if that's a weird question.
It's not a weird question. I would say my off-the-cuff answer is it's premature encouragement. That's the best phrase that comes to mind. It is appropriate encouragement. It's just premature, and it's poorly timed.
It's like, so it's kind of like that Proverbs, like
a word aptly spoken.
Yeah, it's like, what is it? Apples and...
Can you remember?
In
the golden bowls,
golden
apples and bowls or something like that.
Yeah. It's not just about the truth, but the when of the truth.
It's about, being sensitive to the when. And if you were, so for example, I remember things just people wanted to say to me or did say to me that was true. It was true counsel. So there were people who gave me bad counsel, and there are people who gave me true counsel, but it felt poorly timed because I was just... my body is physically still processing a miscarriage. I'm still reminded it just multiple times a day that I have lost life, and I am just grieving that loss. Yep. And so for someone to say, well, God is in control of all things, it's like, He is. And in some ways that's a comfort, but right now there's tension in my relationship with God because of that. Like, I don't know how to talk to Him because I thought He was my safe place, and now He doesn't feel safe because He allowed this. And so where I'm at is that truth is not comforting me as it should, because I'm grieving. What I would more like to hear is the more apt word for me in that moment may be, Jesus knew He was going to raise Lazarus from the dead, but He still paused to cry. So your grief matters. And even when we know good's going to come, you have a Lord who slowed down enough to feel the weight of that moment and cry. And like somebody reminding me of that truth, it's like, God cares about my grief right now, even though I know He's working it for good. That feels helpful. So I think sometimes it's just, it's poorly timed and premature. And at one point I will need the encouragement of Romans 8:28, but it's not today. Yep. So be careful. So truth is good. It's good. But there's a time to be quiet. Yeah. There's a time for speaking. There's a time to be quiet. And there's a time for just being present. So. And all us little theologians out there ought to learn that a little bit better. Slow down. Yeah. And I think that's where, what is it? 1 Corinthians, knowledge puffs up. 1 Corinthians 8. Yep. But love edifies. So there's something that should be operating more than knowledge, more than just right answers. But sometimes we do that to people because we feel nervous about our own suffering or what might happen to us. So we're trying to like theologize it and make it all nice and neat and clean. We talked about this in the last episode. So sometimes it's coming out of our own issues with the tension. Suffering brings about tension. When righteous people suffer, when people walking with God suffer, it introduces a tension into the room, not just for the sufferer, but for everybody else around them. And it's really painful to sit in that with people and just be there and just not clean it up. You know what I mean? Not tie bows on it all, but just to be present. And so we really have to restrain ourselves. I feel that, even as somebody who feels very strongly about good comfort, I still feel tempted to be a bad comforter to people because the tension, you just want to fix it. And we just got to, the person suffering can't get out of that tension. It's their life. Yep. It is their life. So you love them well by entering into the tension with them and staying in it with them and not solving it in a nice, neat way and just being like, I know it, I feel it with you and I'm here. That's the gift you can give. Yeah. So. Love it. Yes. One more. I want to do this guy. I like this one up here. Yes, I want to do as many as we can.
All right.
Shorter answers. We talk too much.
Don't you say that. Don't you dare.
That's why we started a podcast.
That's right. Okay, so Amanda, on our live audience, she wrote, and she says this: is there any indication in the other parts of Job that would indicate Satan uses these friends to try to trip up Job to have a wrong view of God? She says, I ask, since Satan clearly has a hand in the suffering. So could Satan be working in Job's friends to tamper with Job's view of God by having them be such lousy counselors? Yeah.
Yep.
Is that? I
what
think
would you say
that
to that?
every time untruth is going out into the world, it is there's an element of the demonic behind it. I don't necessarily think that it's certainly not explicitly said in the book of Job, but we can just know anytime that we're misrepresenting God, that we are poorly framing who he is or how he operates or any of that, that it is, there's an element, and it sounds like overstating it to say it like this, but there's an element of it being satanic in a sense, because it's competing with the way things are ontologically. It's competing with how God actually operates. And that is a real serious thing. Actually, when I read that question, what came to mind was Peter's interaction with Jesus in Matthew 16, where Jesus explains that he's going to the cross. And you have another one of these tension moments that we kind of feel in the book of Job, where Peter sort of brings his understanding of how suffering works to the table, and he rebukes Jesus. Peter says in verse 22, Peter took him aside, which, by the way, never take Jesus aside and rebuke him. He took Jesus aside and began to rebuke him, saying, God forbid it, Lord. This shall never happen to you. But he, Jesus, turned and said to Peter, get behind me, Satan. You are a stumbling block to me, for you are not setting your mind on God's interest but man. So two things to notice here. One is Peter right now is motivated by love for Jesus in saying this.
Yeah.
Right? In the same way that the friends...
He's well-intentioned.
Yeah, in chapter 2, we're told the friends show up to Job with the intention to comfort him. Why are they there? They love him. They're there to comfort him.
Yeah.
That's why they're there. So two things can be true at once. Peter and the friends are both there to do some comforting, to communicate love, and also Jesus says, that's Satan. So put that in your theological pipes and smoke it, right? That's what's being said. Peter, I know right now that you love me and you don't want to see me die. But what I know is behind this is a wrong view of what Messiah has actually come to do. And that wrong view is actually satanic. Job's friends, I know you're here to comfort. I know that you're well-intentioned, but the enemy can even use good intentions, sweet hearts, all of those things to do very evil things.
Right. Well, and in a similar way, we know from the end of the book of Job that God says of the friends, for you have not spoken of me what is right. So they are under a statement from God later that you were not right.
Yeah.
And that is, in a similar way, the place Peter finds himself in. And I do think it is, I think it's not made as clear in the text, but I think it is kind of the final piece of Job's suffering, that even as he's lost it all, his friends there to comfort him turn into his enemies and turn into accusers. So that even in the midst of all he's already lost, he, on top of it all, has the suffering of loneliness, misunderstanding, and his friends have turned into enemies, pointing the finger at him. And I think that is like the final blow. Gosh, it's like, at least amidst it all, can I just have a friend? And he doesn't have that. So yes to that. Okay, what about, someone asked this essentially, what do we say to people who are not helpful comforters in our life. Like when someone...
Get behind me, Satan. I lead with that. I actually try to say it once a week. It's just good for the blood, just kind of, it's like drinking kombucha. It's like gut health stuff. Just get behind me, Satan.
Wow.
Find a person this week and look them in the eye, and you're going to find your life's going to improve.
But yeah, like that was really, and that's what Tiffany from our live audience asked, but just essentially how do you, like, not only how do you not shut down when people are giving you like kind of come to Jesus talks when you're grieving, lenting, but like, what do you say back to them maybe? Because that's something I've been asked before by people as I talk about suffering or grief. It's like, well, what do I say to the person who walked up to me and said, hey, have you considered that it might be because of X, Y, or Z, that this thing in your life, or they're trying to make it better? I think it depends on your relationship with that person. If it's a past...
Hey, have you considered that your face is dumb?
That's what you want to say.
That's what I want to say. That's right.
Actually...
But that's why I think Get Behind Me, Satan, just to come back to it, guys, it has that spiritual flavor, right? So I don't know, just pray about it, okay?
Well,
keep going.
I did have
It is a good question.
It is a good question because it does happen. It is a human tendency to do that. If you have lost... If you've been in a season of suffering, it's very likely that people have said unhelpful things to you. And what do you do about that? I think that just because you have, even if we can say you're being sinned against, even if it's that, it's never appropriate for us to respond to sin with more sin and to respond to evil with evil. We are called to overcome evil with good. So I think the temptation then in the sufferer who's being told something unhelpful is to be like, well, you're dumb. What you said, get behind me, Satan. Don't say that. And just, talk about them behind their back and say negative things. I think the loving thing depends on the relationship. If there were people who said stuff to me in passing that I did not know well. They were not a close friend. They said it, and it was like, I need to overlook that offense. The Bible in Proverbs says it's the glory of man to overlook an offense. There are many offenses we are called to just forgive quietly in our hearts and overlook. But if it were a close friend to me, a closer relation, that maybe a family member or somebody said that, I think the right response is to say something. And again, we feel so gosh, I'm the one suffering here. I shouldn't have to counsel you and tell you how to care about me. That's how we feel. Mm-hmm. But the reality is you often do have to tell other people how their words are hitting you. Hey, when you said that, it really made me feel this. Or that's really not helpful right now. And I know it's true, but this is where I'm really at. What I really need from you is this. And to confront that person, I think that really is love. It is love to speak to somebody that you're in relationship with and bring those hurts to them because they are a type of hurt. Mm. And Job's trying to do that with his friends. When you read the book, he's not silent to them. He's speaking up and speaking back to them. So I think it's right. Sometimes it's right to overlook it. Sometimes it's right to approach it and have a conversation, even though you might not have the energy for that. You might not want to. You might not feel like you shouldn't have to do it. Doesn't matter. We overcome evil with good. And that's how communities grow. That's how we learn to both rejoice with one another and mourn with one another all at the same moment. It takes a lot of effort from all parties. And that involves us that are suffering, even when we're not being helped well.
That was better than my "Get Behind Me, Satan" answer, for what it's worth. I think if you were just like tossing a coin, you had to go with one. I would go with Kelly's. I'd go with Kelly's.
Hey, can we answer this one about questions?
Sure.
Especially because I feel like we just talked about this. The Martyrs in Revelation, there's a moment where it was just last week, right, in our last episode that you talked about this, that they asked God how long until justice will
Revelation 6, I think. Yep.
Right. How long until you'll exercise justice over the bloodshed for us? So does that mean it's right to question God? Does that mean God welcomes questions? Because in that moment, the martyrs have a question. How long, God? Why haven't you made it right?
Yeah.
Does that mean that our questions are welcomed by him?
Yeah, I think it's all about the motive of the question. Because, and I think we mentioned this in a past episode too, Mary's comment to the angel and Zacharias' comment to the angel are very similar.
They're questions, you mean? They both question
they're both,
God through the...
They're both asking a question. What they say is not wildly different from each other.
That's true.
And Mary gets encouragement, and Zechariah gets his mouth shut up for, the duration of his son's,
He's disciplined,
Yeah.
essentially.
Yeah,
It's
that's right.
a type of discipline.
And when the angel is kind of explaining why, it has everything to do with heart posture. It has like the you have disbelief in God and what he's capable of behind your question. So I think questions are totally permissible. You can't read the Psalms without getting there.
Yeah.
We have this example, Revelation. These people they are sinless now, right? So
Right,
they have
right, yeah.
died. Their sinful nature is gone.
Right.
And apparently you can not have a sinful nature and still ask, why, God? So that's isn't that an interesting insight to think about? Like that also just a side
You don't
note.
automatically know everything.
That's the other side
Yeah.
note. You're not infinitely wise when you die, or infinitely knowledgeable. They
Right.
lack information, and they've got curiosity about why God hasn't done a thing. And neither of those things are wrong or sinful. It's taking place in heaven. So that is interesting. So that gives me permission that I can bring my questions to God, and that's not sinful, but that I should always be curious about my own heart posture in it. And I like to just, anytime I'm bringing questions to God, I'm trying to he already reads my mind, guys. He's omniscient. So he knows like if I got some, like bitterness in my head. So I'm just talking it out with him. If I've got a question, why is this happening, Lord? And Lord, even when I say that, here's what I'm feeling towards you. I'm feeling angry because of, he already knows. So it's good to I just try to like verbally process my way into like a healthy place with him when I'm praying. So yes, bring your questions, but be self-aware enough to know like you need to expose your motives to yourself even and be able to let God know that you trust him even despite the fact that you don't understand. Yeah.
I think that would be a great Bible challenge, is to pay attention to all the questions. Like just read through the New Testament and see the types of questions people ask Jesus and how he responds. I think it's very interesting because he responds very differently to different people when they ask questions. Some people he does not give them clear answers. Some people he gives very clear and direct answers. And I think that if you do that, let us know what you find out, because I think that'd be really fun.
You'll get 15 spirit points if you do.
Okay, can I ask one last question? This is actually a question I wanted to ask you that came out of our last episode. How about that?
Will you marry me? We're already married. So, no, I won't, because I already have. All right.
I don't even know how to respond to that one. Okay.
That's like half of our marriage, though. I don't even know how to respond
That's
to what
true.
you said, Jimmy. All right.
Okay, so, in the last episode, we talked about the friends, just the theology, the two clashing theologies, right? That only sinners suffer, that bad people get bad things, and good people get good things. That's the incorrect theology that the friends have and are operating in. But can we just take that a little bit out of the world of even just suffering? I think that that's a very normal struggle that we have. It's a temptation to embrace that sense of karma-like posture with God.
Yep.
So, like, how would you say, does that show up in maybe our everyday life? That kind of karma mentality in a relationship with God? Kind of like tit for tat, like I do these good things and so I get good things. Like, do you see that showing up in, because I don't think it's just in suffering that theological framework is operating.
No, it really, the sort of karma culture thing does express itself in our suffering, but it can express itself on our best days too. I went through a really long season, years of just finding that so much of my devotional life, spiritual rhythms, habits of scripture reading, prayer, and all that was really a sort of karma-driven experience. I began to realize, God began to expose my heart. Oh, you know what I'm doing today? You know why I feel so bad that I missed my quote-unquote quiet time this morning? I don't feel bad that I miss time with the Lord because I enjoy his company. I feel bad because when I don't do that, I lack the assurance today that like we're good and like he's going to be like he's got my back, you know. And what I discovered was even my devotional life wasn't in some ways like a little bit of a rabbit's foot for me. I rubbed this rabbit's foot right here, and then God's gonna owe me, you know. And that's and when we get bad in our life, and when we get suffering in our life, you know, that's one way that this whole like karma culture shows up, but it can show up in the most noble ways. And I think it's actually a good opportunity for us to ask our own selves in those moments of just in any point in our Christian life, what is the why behind my behavior right now?
Right.
God is so much more interested in what is driving this car than that the car is getting to the destination. You know, if I spend my whole life pouring it out for the poor and preaching sermons and doing all this, but I am doing it as a way to get God to owe me one, I'm really just operating in the same theology that Job's friends operated in, the same theology that pervades prosperity gospel preaching, the same theology that runs through most world religions and sort of like the karma thing. It's all that, and Christians are just not those type of people. That's not how we operate.
I think it can show up too in the assumption of things like what if I have a friend who's experiencing anxiety and depression and I'm not? Well, it's probably because like I've got a better spiritual life, you know. Like we could make assumptions like, well, let me help you by like, you know, like helping you out with the, you know, or whatever, or like good things that have happened. You know, I wrote about this a little bit in Purposeful, my latest book that I released. Like, why did I even get the help in my life to learn how to write, to get connected with publishers? It's like, I could answer that question one way and be like, well, I did all these things, right? But ultimately what I feel is like, I don't know why me and not somebody else. I know plenty of other writers who really have desire to do those things, and it has not happened. So I think there's a temptation to like go, wait, this good thing happened because I did good things, and these bad things happened because I did bad things. And we just need to be careful. That's why I was thinking about it in our last episode, that it's like, this isn't just in suffering that this happens. We just need to be careful to make sure that no karma theology is operating in our lives. God doesn't operate like that. He operates in grace. And he gives us not what we deserve. We think we're getting what we deserve, good and bad, and God's operating on a totally different plane, and it's a better one. That we all deserve way worse than what we're getting. Yeah, we're all getting more grace than we ever thought we ever could imagine getting. Yeah. So
yeah, that's actually probably a great place to end. I do think that is such an important thing for us to understand. All right. That's the episode. Thank you guys for tuning in with us today. Kelly, what do you want to say to the lovely people at home?
At home, they're probably in their car. But if you would like to be at home,
I picture them on a yacht, a small yacht. It's not grandiose, but it's a tasteful yacht. That's how I see you.
Is there such a thing as a tasteful yacht?
Oh, there's a tasteful yacht. Trust me.
If you would like to join Clearly from home, you can do that by becoming part of our Patreon team and joining our live Zoom audience.
What?
Yes, and you can join us in the evenings when we record.
What?
Ask us questions in real time, share your comments.
How do I get to be part of that?
Go to patreon.com.
Patreon.com?
And search Jimmy and Kelly.
Does it cost $10,000?
No, only $5.
Only $5?
Yes.
$5 a day?
A month.
$5 a month?
That's one Starbucks drink.
That's
one
like the
loaf
tax
of bread,
on one Starbucks drink.
one dozen eggs.
Yeah.
That's what it feels like.
Gotcha.
But you can join us and participate in part of our live recordings of these episodes. We would love to have you.
And all other cool stuff that we send you too. So be sure to check it out, patreon.com. We love you guys. Grateful for you tuning in. We will see you next week.